An Egyptian narrative of about 1080 BC, the story of Wane men, provides an insight into the scale of their trading activity. One of the characters is Werkati, a Phoenician merchant living at Tanis in Egypt's Nile Delta. As many as 50 ships carry out his business, plying back and forth between the Nile and the Phoenician port of Sidon. The most prosperous period for Phoenicia was the 10th century BC, when the surrounding region was stable. For all his fame and celebration, William Shakespeare remains a mysterious figure with regards to personal history. There are just two primary sources for information on the bard, his works, and various legal and church documents that have survived from Elizabethan times. Naturally, there are many gaps in this body of information, which tells us little about Shakespeare the man. Lawrence Stephen Lowry RBSRA was an English artist. Many of his drawings and paintings depict Pendlebury, Lancashire, where he lived and worked for more than 40 years, and also Salford and its surrounding areas. Lowry is famous for painting scenes of life in the industrial districts of northwest England in the mid-20th century. He developed a distinctive style of painting and is best known for his urban landscapes peopled with human figures often referred to as matchstick man. He painted mysterious unpopulated landscapes, brooding portraits, and the unpublished marionette works, which were only found after his death. In animals, a movement is coordinated by a cluster of neurons in the spinal cord called the central patterns generator, CPG. This produces signals that drive muscles to contract rhythmically in a way that produces running or walking, depending on the pattern of pulses. A simple signal from the brain instructs the CPG to switch between different modes, such as going from a standstill to walking. It's relatively easy to envisage what you'll be doing next week, but imagining a more distant future can be challenging because it feels so abstract. We tend to fall back on memories of the past to construct our visions of the future, but it's harder to guess which past memories will prove pertinent in making sense of things that are more distant. Research suggests that people who plan for failure are best equipped when problems arise. To do that, though, we need to picture ourselves in the distant future and predict what specific obstacle we may confront. In Mexico and Brazil, they have developed conditional cash transfer programs. They are what they say on the tin. Cash is given to women of low income, but there are conditions. Children have to be taken to nutrition and health clinics. Older children have to remain in school. In Brazil, the result has been great reductions in poverty and inequality, improvements in school attendance, especially of girls, and health improvements. Questions have been raised as to whether the conditionality is needed. Migrant children who do thinkers' schools in cities usually get a worse education than their city-born kin. State schools that accept migrant pupils often operate what PTE of National Taiwan University refers to as apartheid school published. In these, migrant children are taught separately from redistribution ones in the same school and are even kept apart from them in the playground. There are few studies on research training programs within the realm of Asian American health disparities. The existing literature on training programs tends to emphasize broad components such as mentorship and an examination of the community and academic partnership. Moreover, the current available literature pertains mostly to clinical practitioners such as nurses and doctors in residency rather than researchers. Few articles employed quantitative evaluation methods, because most of these evaluations were limited to a low number of participants. As yet, the new explanation is incomplete. So far, the researchers have only computed the effects caused by one property of matter falling into a black hole, its electric charge. They have not shown the effect of its mass, which would also be important. Their calculations therefore account only for part of the information that is lost. But they have established a principle that may lead to a full accounting of the matter. That would let physicists sleep easy in their beds, in the knowledge that reality is once again behaving, at least approximately, how they think it ought to. How to look after all these elderly folks is a different problem. Governments around the world are already struggling to support growing numbers of retired people who depend on a shrinking working population. 18 OECD countries have raised pension ages. At the same time, workers are being asked to dig deeper into their own pockets. None of this is enough. The World Health Organization has been working with ministries of health and other stakeholders of Pacific Island countries to build climate-resilient health systems. Although a disease-specific approach is useful initially, in the long run a comprehensive, intersectoral program is required. As recommended by WHO, this program should address I. Health governance and policies tackling climate risks, 2. Health information, integrated surveillance and climate early warning systems, and 3. Preventive and curative services. In Italy, some of these cities were able to gain control of the surrounding country and to become city-states, resembling those of the ancient Greeks. Their autonomy was assisted by the continuing struggle between popes and emperors, between church and state, again, a thoroughly unique Western experience. In these states, the modern world began to take form. Although the people were mainly Christians, their life and outlook became increasingly secular. Here, and not only in Italy but in other cities north of the Alps, arose a worldview that celebrated the greatness and dignity of mankind, which was a very sharp turning away from the medieval Western tradition that put God and life in the hereafter at the center of everything. The next topic is going to be black holes, and this is a similar situation. 15, 20 years ago black holes were sort of poised precariously on the boundary between theoretical physics and science fiction. A boundary that is more porous than you might believe. But again, in the past 15 years or so this has been converted into a standard topic in observational astronomy. There are dozens, probably hundreds of objects we can point to in the sky and say, yes, those things are black holes. And so now, the current topic of research is, do these things that we are pretty sure are black holes actually behave in the incredibly bizarre, science fiction manner that the theoretical physicists have been talking about for the past 30 or 40 years? So, to what extent are these very exotic behaviors actually manifested in real life? In 1962, an English political scientist and journalist by the name of Bernard Crick wrote a short and very polemical and influential little book called In Defense of Politics, and by politics Crick meant a distinctive type of human activity where conflicts of interests among groups are adjudicated by discussion, persuasion, and debate rather than by force or by fright. Now, the emergence of tropical medicine marked a transition, a transformation, from something that had preceded it, and that I hope won't be confusing. But from the middle of the 18th century, more or less, until the closing decade of the 19th century, there had been an older tradition that can be summarized under the label of diseases of the tropics. And there were a couple of classic statements of this older tradition. One was a work, an important work, by James Lind, an 18th century physician, who wrote an essay on diseases incidental to Europeans in hot climates, and this was built on the experience of Europeans in the West Indies. And then there was another work by James Johnson called The Influence of Tropical Climates on European Constitutions, built on the experience of Europeans in India. Demand for this exotic fabric eventually created the lucrative trade route now known as the Silk Road, taking silk westward and bringing gold, silver, and wool to the east. It was named the Silk Road after its most precious commodity, which was considered to be worth more than gold. The Silk Road stretched over 6,000 kilometers from eastern China to the Mediterranean Sea, following the Great Wall of China, climbing the Pamir mountain range, crossing modern-day Afghanistan and going on to the Middle East, with a major trading market in Damascus. To biomedical researchers all over the world, twins offer a precious opportunity to untangle the influence of genes and environment, of nature and nurture. Because identical twins come from a single egg that splits into two, they share virtually the same genetic code. Any differences between them, one twin having younger-looking skin, for example, must be due to environmental factors, such as less time spent in the sun. Language often seems so skillfully drafted that one can hardly imagine it as anything other than the perfected handiwork of a master craftsman. How else could this instrument make so much out of barely 36 measly morsels of sound? In themselves, these configurations of mouth P, F, B, V, T, D, K, G, SH, A, E, and so on, amount to nothing more than a few haphazard spits and splutters, random noises with no meaning, no ability to express, no power to I'm responsible for student admissions to the college, and I use a computer system to help process student enrollments and to do the timetabling. But it really doesn't suit the way we work these days. It's over 10 years old, and although it was fine when it was first introduced, it is just not good enough now. 20 years ago, the college was quite small and we didn't have the number of students and tutors that we have now. There's a lot more data now, and it sometimes seems the system has crashed. But, in fact, it just takes ages to go from one screen to the next. There are more than 160 known species of chameleons. The main distribution is in Africa and Madagascar and other tropical regions, although some species are also found in parts of southern Europe and Asia. There are introduced populations in Hawaii and probably in California and Florida too. New species are still discovered quite frequently. Dr. Andrew Marshall, a conservationist from York University, was surveying monkeys in Tanzania when he stumbled across a twig snake in the Magambria forest which, frightened, coughed up a chameleon and fled. Though a colleague persuaded him not to touch it because of the risk from venom, Marshall suspected it might be a new species. One of the drawbacks of staying with the same organization is that the person may get stuck doing the same job year after year. In some cases, this can lead to boredom and disillusionment. Moving from one organization to another can be a strategic decision in order to have variety and acquire a range of skills and experience. The person may be incredibly knowledgeable in a range of fields by working in different organizations. One of the drawbacks of staying with the same organization is that the person may get stuck doing the same job year after year. In some cases, this can lead to boredom and disillusionment. Moving from one organization to another can be a strategic decision in order to have variety and acquire a range of skills and experience. The person may be incredibly knowledgeable in a range of fields by working in different organizations. Using the internet has become a normal part of everyday life for many people. They use it to book airline tickets, or to access news about world events, or to follow the fortunes of their favorite football club. Millions of people across the world belong to social networking groups where they keep in touch with their friends and, if they live away from them, their family. In my opinion, these are all good ways to use the internet. But the problem is that the amount of mercury in the environment's increasing. The main reason for this is the power plants used to produce electricity. The main source of energy that most of them use is still coal, and when it's burned it releases mercury into the atmosphere. Some of this gets deposited into lakes and rivers, and if it's ingested by a fish it's not excreted, it stays in the fish's body and it enters the food chain. So it's been known for some time that birds which eat fish may be affected, but what wasn't known until quite recently is that those that eat insects can also be affected. As with all human behavior, there are numerous reasons for it. But often it's caused by someone who feels the need to show their superiority over someone else, in order to feel that they aren't at the lowest level in hierarchy or a group of people. In some cases, one person simply dislikes the other on the basis that the personality of one is in some way incompatible with that of the other person.